This discussion comes up every couple of years. I feel like this is the fighting game problem, how to teach complicated mechanics. Let's take a look.
We haven't talked much about fighting games on this show because high-level fighting game design is often incomprehensible to anyone but designers and aficionados of the genre.
Also, the people who play our games say, you're only minus if you're a bitch, I'm a part of the square button society and all that shit. So, I don't know. Maybe that shit didn't start when they made this video. This video is kind of old.
At the highest levels, fighting games are a beautiful chess match.
YouTube, you guys won't know. Stream will know. I heard this literally 10 seconds ago, and I heard it again, and I'll always reel back when someone says that fighting games are a beautiful chess match. I will always feel that way, because the only thing I'll give you between fighting games and chess is that both games are really brutal. Besides that, like, where I have no idea where people who came up with this analogy, but it's a fucking stupid one. Come on, son. They're called fighting games. It's a pretty easy analogy, I think, that you could make what a fighting game is. Like something you can compare fighting games to. I could think of one really obvious thing.
They aren't about reflexes. Not really. They're about strategy.
But fighting games are about reflexes too, though. You need a lot of shit to play a fighting game.
About move and counter move. In many ways, they play more like a war game than what the layman thinks of as a fighting game. If you're not a fighting game player and you've ever wondered why some of your friends are so enamored of the genre, this is why. This high-level play.
He's actually like giving us props, right? This image is like my brain, where like for some people, this is fighting games, and they do a specific thing. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway.
This play that you've probably never experienced. And that's the rub. Fighting games are a niche genre. Why? Because most players never end up getting the play experience these games are designed around. Anyone who's ever tried to pick up a fighting game knows what an informational brick wall they tend to be. You have to memorize the button combinations that fire off the moves, what triggers them, and what they do.
I kind of want to let him cook a little bit more, but like what's funny is like this really does relate to like what we talked about with like the accessibility thing, where, you know, I feel like every competitive game has that issue. The only thing I can't say is do other games teach it better, because I also searched why is Dota hard? Because everyone's like, Dota's so hard, it's hard, it's a fucking game. So I was like, okay, why is Dota hard? And people are like, oh, it's because you have to memorize a bunch of shit. Like, you gotta know everyone's abilities, and you gotta know what items to use and when, and da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, so you gotta memorize a bunch of shit? Like, just like fighting games? Like, so you gotta memorize a bunch of shit? So when people say this, they're like, oh, you have to memorize a bunch of shit. I'm like, okay.
Because many games in the genre tend to be focused on the genre's core audience, the tutorials tend to be walls of text, followed by a practice room where you can try out moves. That simply is not good enough for games of this level of complexity.
What do they do in, like, let's say, we'll use Dota. What do they do to teach you Dota in the game of Dota? Does it have, like, a good tutorial? I, like, am sort of on the line of tutorials are not great. Dota has no tutorial. Nothing. Oh, shit. MOBAs have shit or no tutorials. You learn everything from YouTube. Interesting.
Right now, many fighting games simply present a single-player campaign that plays exactly like the multiplayer, only with an AI opponent. We can do way better than that.
This shit he's saying happens in other games, so it's like...
One of the most important was the idea of breaking up how much information you're presenting the player.
This is good, actually. This is actually how I learn combos. This is how I learn long combos. I chunk them.
So you're not front-loading everything they have to know. This is what the single player in fighting games should be for. Well, I think an excellent example is the old brawler MMO Dungeon Fighter.
Speaking of Dungeon Fighter, I just have this feel of like, why do people go so much extra in this lane for fighting games, when anytime I ask people about other games that they play, they're like, yeah, this game has a shit tutorial too, you have to learn the game from YouTube, blah blah blah. Like, why do people always so focus on it for fighting games? By the way, I don't have a solution. I don't have a good solution. I learned it the way that people will not learn, right? Like, I spend a lot of time like watching videos, comparing things. I spend a lot of my own personal time doing it, but I don't have a good solution. I'm not here to offer a solution. I just always had that question: why is it unique just for fighting games compared to other games? I mentioned this earlier, but you're like, why did you call chess brutal? Why do you call chess and fighting games brutal? It's one-on-one. The thoughts that most people have who have only played for a little while, or maybe they're like middling in the scene, or they don't play fighting games, is that like when you win, when you beat somebody, you beat them. Like, you beat them. You beat that guy. You beat them. Where in like a team game, it's like our team won, or like if we lost, like, you know, like this dude fucked up, like, you know, the pushing of responsibility that you hear a lot about. Where in fighting games and chess, you can't do that. It's you. It's one-on-one. Generally, if the fighting game is reasonably fair and shit is not out of control, if you lose, you probably fucked up somewhere. So it's a lot of like taking on a lot of accountability. A lot of not blaming the beast, as you might say.
In this game, your character only started with 1 or 2 moves to memorize, and then slowly as you leveled, you'd acquire more.
This dude is such a gamer, by the way.
Then you'd get time with those new moves while grinding out levels and getting loot before you were presented with anything else. By doing this, the player felt empowered rather than overwhelmed, and in the end, many players graduated up to that chess match level of play where fighting games shine, simply by not being expected to start there.
I don't think fighting games really put the expectation on you to win immediately. You only do that if you go fight somebody, frankly. I didn't want to do this yet because I didn't write an outline yet, but fighting games are RPGs. You know what I'm saying? Fighting games are RPGs. The difference between my perspective and, let's say, Lord Extra Credit is that you, the player, you have to level up and you have to do things to level up. Your character doesn't change. You change. Where he's like, oh, I hate to use boomer terminology, but like, let's do like hand holding things to like get them to the point. For DFO, it's literally a fighting game plus RPG, right? But like the fighting game genre is RPG. It's up to you to level up. I mean, we have a great example because Acoustics played Dragon Ball for 3 years. Punk over exaggerated a little. He didn't only play for two weeks. He played Dragon Ball Season 1, but he didn't play a lot. To be fair, he did not play a lot of Dragon Ball in Season 1, but he did. And then he played Dragon Ball for 2 weeks, beat Acoustics, right? Acoustics had 3 years. So it's fair to talk that shit. My dude had plenty of time. It's how you use the time, and that's the game. How do you use that time? Do you make jokes about square button society and mashing all the time? Or do you hyper focus and build the skills that you need to be able to do what you want to do? At this point, some of you might look at me and you're like, oh, okay, it's a boomer from Super back in the day. Like, he played fighting games before Street Fighter 4 came out. So that's like true boomer. But when I started, I was the kid. There were people who played for a long time when I started, and they're like, oh, fuck this new ass bitch. Like, he doesn't know what the fuck's going on. You just fucking get in there and you fight. But a couple of years later, now I'm fucking taking heads, and they're mostly the same because they just play the game. What do you do with the time? How do you spend time to upgrade yourself? You can look at it from this aspect where he has like the DFO's an RPG plus fighting game, or the character has all the tools there. All the tools there are there for you, and it's really overwhelming. But your time that you spend leveling yourself is learning how to apply these tools, learning different concepts in the game and out of the game, and you slowly build your level. And from there, you have your level in that game, and you have a level in the genre. Like, I remember when Strive was coming out, right? And the stream was popping. Streams popping. They're seeing me play Melia. And I remember in beta times, people were like, this character's trash because, you know, Melia takes building. No one is building her. They're just pressing // their soul saying is broken. They come here, watch me. They're like, how are you so good with this character already? Sonic Fox, right? They go to Sonic and be like, how are you so good with Happy Chaos in like a day? Because Sonic's level in fighting games is overall high in the genre. My level in fighting games is overall high in the genre, not just one game. So it's both. Because some people fall in this trap where they get super good at one game and they go, I'm good at fighting games. Then they go to another game and get smoked. I could use myself as an example. I got smoked in Dragon Ball for like 2 years straight. And then eventually, through studying, trial by fire, I'm like, all right, this is what I think the game is. This is what I want to do. And then we did fine, right? We did fine. Only because I knew how to do this over time. I think what this dude probably wants is like a better path to understanding that that's even a thing in the game, which is good. I do actually think that's not a bad thing. Like, all memes aside about this stuff I heard him say before, where I'm like, psh, in the end, having that being clear in a game so that people understand that would be good. Like, a lot of these things I talked about, you don't get that. You might not get that depending on who you. If you hang out with the Unga people, you'll never hear this type of shit. Real talk. Let's keep going.
If you're using an RPG-like system, you can give bonus rewards for using these types of techniques.
Yeah, like he wants to gamify it in the game, right?
Things like having the game go into slow motion with a big reversal opportunity flashing on the screen when this concept is introduced. Or you could do a Sands of Time thing, where when the player is defeated, the game rewinds to just before their last chance to interrupt the attack that killed them and tells them what to do.
You know what's funny too? Low key, some games have done that. So we have ACR. ACR is like the GOAT for this. You know, let's meet the boomers halfway, right? ACR, I got some problems with it. But one, again, good ass game. Two, the quality for players is so good. So ACR has a thing where you can pause the replay and then do training mode from that situation. So like, if you feel like you're like, man, I got hit by that thing in neutral, like what happened, what should I do? You can like repeat that situation over and over until you figure out a solution from replay, where most fighting games, you can't even rewind. Like, if you watch me do like Strive replays on stream, I always have to go back to the previous round and go forward and then do it again. Many modern fighting games have way more in-game messaging of showing you why you got hit. Characters will say stuff like in Blaze Blue, characters are literally like, oh, I got hit by an overhead. Like Kokonoe is the funniest one. She goes, overhead, fuck. Like, she's like, oh, I got hit by overhead. Or like in Persona, the navigators would be like, that was an overhead. What the fuck's wrong with you? You got hit because you got whip punished. You got hit because you got counter hit. You got hit because of blah, blah, blah. Again, a little forward thinking with this one.
But however you do it, the thing to recognize is that fighting games will never reach the audience they could until they do more to help people get to the level where they can experience real fighting game play.
Here's another thing, right? We consistently have a discussion. We all play fighting games. Maybe when I make this video, maybe some of you who are watching don't play fighting games, right? And a lot of people who play and who are kind of in it, maybe don't play, but they're kind of in it. They're like, man, this genre should be so much bigger. Like, why is this genre not bigger? And there's a bunch of reasons between like online stuff, which you talked about, and now like everyone's pushing to always have good net code. The tutorials not being good is some bullshit, honestly, especially from talking to y'all in the chat. I think there's actually one that people have not touched on. He like kind of does it, but I'm doing it from a different angle where he's like, oh, the game doesn't teach players enough to make meaningful choices so that they can enjoy it, so the audience will never be big enough. Where I am the reverse, and I think devs have the different perspective too, and this is why we have some of the modern fighting games be the way they are when they come out. I think people can't tell when things are good in fighting games. And I think literally people can't tell when good stuff happens in a fighting game. You probably could apply this to a MOBA as well. Like I'm on Beast Coast and we have a Dota team. We have content people like, yo, check out this clip. This clip is sick. And to me, it literally looks like nothing is happening. And I watch that. I'm like, what the fuck is this? But then everyone else who's watching is popping off. And then I'm kind of like, oh, I guess this is what it's like when, someone like delays by like 3 frames and then does a low and I pop off. I'm like, damn, the call out. And then like everyone else is silent. So one thing on my end that I'm trying to do as a content creator is trying to show not just the situation and show you what to do, but also like start getting you to understand what makes situations exciting in a fighting game in the first place. So like fighting games, shooters, and MOBAs, probably shooters are the easiest to tell when someone is good. Even for like shooters today, when you see someone go down in a shot, like when you see a headshot, you know it's a headshot, like basically, right? Like, oh, he shot him once, like he hit him once, dead, like boom. For MOBAs, I mean, just way more people play. So even though there's people like me who have no idea what's going on, there's enough people who know what's going on because most of the MOBAs are free to play, so a lot of people play, so they get that. Even like the super famous Evo Moment 37 that everyone spams all the time, part of the reason why that still carries on is because it's been explained. Like, people know exactly what's happening in that situation, and they know most of why it's ridiculous.
I propose that single player is the best place to do this.
I kind of agree with this, though. You could do a lot of stuff with single player. I think since here, they've tried a lot more interesting stuff, I think. In the end, this is one of the main reasons why I don't think fighting games are like chess. And when he was like, oh, like, talk about, like, the reactions and shit at the beginning, in the end, you need to fight. Like, fighting games are like fighting. I mean, you're not getting punched in the face, but like that whole thing of like you go into your first match in a fighting game and you're overwhelmed by the person running at you, like throwing out moves, air dashing on you. Maybe it's an anime game, they're doing anime stuff. You need to literally experience that to start the path on becoming a decent fighting game player. Let's say a game did all like the one player puzzle mode, test ABC shit that this person recommends, right? So you do all this shit. Then you go into one match, go up against like Potemkin. How ready are you going to be? You do have to actually be in the situation. In the end, it is a fighting game. We fight, we play each other. There is definitely room in single player content for more and for better single player content. Like, I will say that in my opinion, that's one of the best things about NRS games is that they have so much single player content. As far as like getting people to move deeper into the genre, you can't avoid them playing. Like, there's not that much you can do better. The main things you could do is just try to find ways to encourage people of the same skill level to play. So matchmaking is really important. For this one, it's one of the things I really like about the tower concept overall in Strive is like the way they encourage people of similar skill levels to play each other. Because definitely, I will say a huge wall is most people aren't comfortable playing people a lot better themselves, both for the in-game experience and then like mental stuff like, oh, I'm wasting this guy's time and blah blah blah. So I think that's like a big thing. This shadowboxing thing, I think cannot be a thing.
Because if we don't use our single player better, as fighting games become more complex, they're only going to become a smaller and smaller niche.
This guy, oh my god. Listen. Where the boom is at?
A place that can be a training
Listen,
ground
listen.
and a good time all at once. Because if we don't use our single player better, as fighting games become more complex, they're only going to become a smaller and smaller niche.
Sheesh. Oh my god, dude. The entire community in the abyss on that one. As fighting games become more and more complex. Meanwhile, we're all talking about how all the games are for babies now. Honestly, better than I thought it was going to be. I actually thought this was going to be a meme video. And I was just going to talk shit the whole time. We got some good stuff out of this. High key. Got some good stuff out of this.